Imagine planning a journey where the biggest danger isn't bad weather, it's other people. No maps you can trust, no hotels, and yet people still travel. Why? And how did anyone actually get anywhere in medieval Europe without it being a disaster? There were shared challenges that made movement slow, risky, and physically demanding. Travel mattered, though. Merchants, pilgrims, messengers, students, nobles, and even peasants all had reasons to move. And every journey reshaped bodies, beliefs, and entire societies. Here's the first myth to bust. Medieval people didn't just stay put their whole lives. Many did, but plenty didn't. Pilgrimage alone put thousands on the road. Routes to Rome, Jerusalem, or Santiago de Compostela became international highways of faith. Merchants chased profit across borders. Scholars walked from England to Paris to study theology. Messengers carried royal orders that could decide war. Travel wasn't casual, it was purpose-driven. No one took a medieval vacation. Every journey risked health, money, and reputation. That's why travel was often seen as a form of hardship. Now here's where medieval travel gets quietly terrifying. For much of the early Middle Ages, travelers moved without compasses, without reliable maps, and without anything we'd recognize as navigation technology. And no, that doesn't mean people were wandering randomly. It means they navigated in a completely different way. Let's bust a myth right away. Medieval travelers weren't clueless about direction. They just didn't rely on instruments. They relied on memory, landmarks, and shared knowledge. Imagine setting out on a journey where the road itself is the map. Travelers followed rivers, coastlines, ridgelines, and valleys. These weren't just geographic features. They were lifelines. Rivers pointed the way to towns. Valleys meant food and shelter. High ground meant visibility, but also exposure. Church towers mattered more than you might think. Bells didn't just call people to prayer, they signaled where civilization was. Seeing a spire on the horizon could mean safety, food, and human voices. Most directions came from people, not objects. Follow the road until the oak split by lightning. Turn left where the stream bends. If you reach the old stone cross, you've gone too far. Can you imagine relying on landmarks that might burn down, wash away, or simply be misunderstood? And here's the dangerous part. Everyone gave directions slightly differently. Memory failed. Distances were vague. A day's walk meant very different things depending on terrain, weather, and the traveler's health. Getting lost wasn't rare, it was expected. Forests were especially feared, not because people thought they were magical, but because they erased orientation. Paths vanished, light faded, sounds carried strangely. Medieval sources talk about travelers walking in circles without realizing it. Now let's talk maps, because this is where modern viewers often get confused. Early medieval maps, when they existed at all, weren't meant for navigation. They were symbolic, not practical. Jerusalem at the center, east at the top. The goal wasn't accuracy, it was meaning. So no one was unfolding a map at a crossroads and saying, "Ah, yes, we're here." That kind of navigational map only becomes more common later, especially from the 13th century onward, and mostly for sailors. Which brings us to compasses. The magnetic compass appears in Europe around the late 12th to early 13th century, first in maritime contexts. Even then, it didn't replace traditional navigation, it supplemented it. And it took generations before people trusted it fully. So most travelers still relied on the sun's path, prevailing winds, stars, and experience. At night, navigation was risky. The North Star helped, but only if skies were clear and you knew what you were looking for. Clouds meant waiting. Waiting meant hunger. There's also a social layer here that often gets overlooked. Knowing the roads was a form of power. Local guides, sometimes hired, sometimes forced, controlled access. Pilgrimage routes developed because of faith, and they were also known, safe, and predictable. Step off those routes, and you entered uncertainty. This shaped society in subtle ways. Trade clustered along known paths. Towns grew where travelers passed through. Entire regions stayed isolated, simply because they were hard to navigate. By the late Middle Ages, things began to shift. Written itineraries became more common. Road markers increased near cities. Portolan charts transformed sea travel. Navigation didn't become easy, but it became less personal, less dependent on memory alone. But for centuries, knowing where you were wasn't about coordinates. It was about recognizing a bend in the river and thinking, yes, I've been here before, or hoping someone else had. Now, let's talk infrastructure, or the idea of it. Roman roads still existed in parts of Europe, especially in Italy and southern France. Where they survived, they were a gift. But many had fallen into disrepair. Bridges collapsed. Paths turned into mud rivers after rain. Most roads were just dirt tracks shaped by carts and hooves. In winter, they vanished under snow. In spring, they swallowed shoes. Travel speed was painfully slow. A healthy person on foot might manage 20 to 25 miles a day. Carts were slower, horses were faster, but expensive and fragile. Overworking a horse could ruin a traveler financially. And here's the surprise. Water travel was often safer and faster than land. Rivers and coastal routes became medieval highways, even though storms and shipwrecks were real threats. Now, about the dangers on the road. Let's address the popular image. Masked bandits leaping from forests. Did robbery happen? Yes, but it wasn't the only, or even the biggest, danger. Disease was constant. Travelers drank unfamiliar water and slept in crowded inns. Lords charged fees for bridges, roads, even mountain passes. Hospitality wasn't guaranteed. Some towns welcomed travelers, others saw them as suspicious outsiders. So, where did you sleep while traveling? Short answer, wherever you could. Inns existed, but quality varied wildly. Some offered a bed, others offered a floor. Privacy wasn't a concept you could count on. Monasteries sometimes provided lodging, especially for pilgrims. This wasn't charity. It was spiritual duty. In return, travelers prayed, donated, or worked. Now let's talk about the food. It was basic and repetitive. Bread, cheese, ale, maybe salted meat. Fresh food depended on location and season. Malnutrition wasn't unusual on long journeys, and that affected immunity and mood. Travel changed bodies. Weight loss, chronic pain, and illness were common. But it also changed minds. Travelers brought back stories, ideas, and technologies that slowly reshaped Europe. Let's debunk another myth. Nobles didn't travel in luxury all the time. Yes, elites had horses, servants, and better food. But comfort was relative. Even kings complained about drafts, fleas, and exhaustion. Royal courts were itinerant, moving constantly to avoid draining local resources. Women did travel, especially pilgrims, merchants' wives, and nobles, but faced additional dangers, including harassment. Some traveled in groups or under religious protection for safety. Over time, things improved. By the late medieval period, inns became more standardized. Roads improved near cities. Written itineraries appeared. Travel didn't become easy, but it became slightly less terrible. That shift mattered. It supported trade, education, and eventually the cultural exchanges that fueled the Renaissance. So, what did it take to travel in medieval Europe? Endurance, money, faith, and a willingness to risk everything for the chance to arrive somewhere new. Travel shaped medieval society in quiet but powerful ways. It expanded the boundaries of what the world felt like